All right, here we are. We are live at lunch once again. This is live at lunch Bible study with Rev Bruce and Pastor John Powell, and we are here going to be looking at week 16, chapter 16, as we go through the book of Jeremiah week by week, chapter by chapter. And so we're at week 16. We're exploring it and experiencing it. And Pastor, what would you say was your experience with this chapter this week?
With this chapter, we see that God is doubling down on the children of Israel for their wickedness and their defilement of the land. And all of the descriptive words that are used through this chapter let you know that God is totally going to banish them from the land that he had given them, because they have totally turned away from him.
Yeah, and when you look at the way they've gone about it, it's it'd be one thing if you just had like a single sit down, trying to have some form of family intervention, but this has been an ongoing thing. This has been a almost grueling thing over and over, and so God really warns Jeremiah in the beginning. That took me by surprise. Like, don't take a wife or have children among these people, because this is the type of disgraceful death that they will face. In fact, he tells Jeremiah not to even engage or deal with them mourning, and says, don't even offer them a cup of consolation.
Mm-hmm. Don't go to any funerals.
Yeah, which was customary for people to share in their neighbors or their brothers' mourning and their experience of losing loved ones. And he said, don't even deal with that. Don't even do that. And so to have God say that to the prophet just caught me like, whoa, okay, this what we talking about? Like this is how we dealing with it? And God, in His own way, um, sees fit to deal with it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it really, got me going on that one to get the chapter started. And I was taken in by that, and then to go further, um, I was really, caught up in this whole thing of um, when they ask about it, when the people of Israel ask about it, what's to be said. And it says, it shall be when you show this people all these words, they shall say to you, why has the Lord pronounced all this great disaster against us? Or what is our iniquity?
Mm-hmm.
What is our sin that we have committed against the Lord our God? And God is straightforward, and he breaks that thing down in the next two verses, 11 and 12, that just says, it's the sins of your fathers where you have forsaken, God and not kept the law of God, and then also went after other gods. But he points out that this generation has done worse than its fathers.
And their fathers did.
Right? And so it reminds me of when we talk about the lineage of kings in Jerusalem, where you had gone through all these other kings, but Ahab had done worse than any other king before him. They had done some things. They had done some things that were wrong, some things that were against the rules, some things that were, blasphemous. but he did things that were worse than any other king before him. You know, and so
Mm,
that reminded me of that, and that whole idea of now you're being sent into captivity, and as God says, you want to serve other gods. Well, you'll serve other gods day and night there, and you will find no favor. God's not going to give you any favor over there. You know, and it's it's amazing that even up until this point, 16 chapters into it, Israel is still asking, well, what did we do? Where did we go wrong? And as troublesome as that may be, they're still asking the question as if they've done nothing wrong.
nothing wrong.
They're still asking the question as if there's no reason, right? As if there's no reason for them to, have any issue with anything that's been going on. And I crack up off of that because here it's as if they're oblivious to it.
Hmm.
Know that it's happening, you know. And now jumping back to verse 7, it says, "No one shall break bread for the mourner to comfort him for the dead, nor shall anyone give him the cup of consolation, right, to drink for his father or his mother."
Hmm.
And this cup of consolation, as I was studying it, was breaking down one here how it symbolizes the comfort that we give one another when we are mourning and suffering.
Right.
And then secondly, it's the support, that we are sharing in this cup, that we're empathizing with one another. We're not just saying, "Oh, sorry to hear about that," but we're actually sharing in this cup. We're partaking in uh, emphatic uh, participation in someone else's mourning for friends, family, or relatives. You know,
Hmm.
and it's like it says, it's related to Proverbs 31:6, where it says, "Give strong drink unto him that is ready to perish, and wine unto those that be of heavy hearts." Right? And so when you see this, don't even participate in that mourning. Uh, how does that come across to you, Pastor?
It's letting us know that for Jeremiah, God wanted him wholly separated from the people. Number one, he couldn't marry, and that was very important in Israel to have an offspring. He would not have that. And then God tells him, uh, don't go to any festival where there are people who are joyous, because that's going to be short lived. And then the third thing he tells them is don't even go to people's funerals. In other words, I want you to be a prophet separated completely from these people, and you are to tell them exactly what I have declared to you. And it is strange that the people are still saying, what have we done? When
Mm-hmm.
the first commandment is, thou shalt have no other gods before me. And they started right off breaking that commandment by worshiping these other gods. And it wasn't that they didn't pay homage to the God of Israel. We find in other books that they did. But they were mixing all this other stuff along with the true and the living God. And God is saying here, I'm fed up with it. I will not tolerate it any longer. I'm going to mete out full punishment for what you have done.
Yeah, it's I'll say the language has um, as you mentioned, the Lord's doubled down a little bit on it, and he's gotten a little more fiery. I think the language has been a little more sensitive than what he had said before. With ideas of whoredom and being, a Jezebel per se. But in essence, I think what you just brought up is the problem. You can't. It goes back to the saying that Jesus said: you can't serve two masters.
Right.
Whether it be God versus money, whether it be God versus the ones you love and the career you pursue, or whatever it might be, you can't serve two masters. At some point you will be divided, and you will have to choose. And in this case, even though they did fulfill their sacerdotal duties, and still held festivals and still sang songs, still did whatever for their feast days. That's why the Lord said they were empty, and He didn't want to hear their songs. He didn't want to, have their worship, because it's bad enough that you are stepping out and you are going with these other gods, but now you're stepping out and tiptoeing back in to get this done, to check off the box and say you did it, but your heart's not in it, your soul's not in it. And we are no longer connected as we should have been from the start, because of what you have brought into the relationship that was once just us.
Absolutely. It's sort of like a man coming home and saying to his wife, well, I brought another woman, and she's going to move in here with us too. And God, when He put man and woman together, He made it plain that it was supposed to be an exclusive relationship just between the two of them. And when it comes to our relationship with the Lord, that is supposed to be exclusive. He's saying you don't include other things and other gods along with me. There's no one equal to me. And so He was looking for an exclusive relationship with the children of Israel, and they wanted to mix all of the gods in with Him, and He is saying that He will not accept that. And at this point, He's telling them the punishment that He's going to mete out, and it even sounds more fierce than it did in chapter 15.
Well, the explanation is back to Exodus 20:3. You're gonna have no other gods before me. And if we're not honoring that, then that's part of the Mosaic covenant. And this is you gotta understand, still with these prophets, with this time, He's still chipping away at the gap between Him and this people that He's led out of captivity in Egypt, and He's generations into this. And so far it has on a very limited scale, not always proven successful. Between him and his people, and so yeah, the relationship is tattered, for lack of a better word, based upon what God's able to provide.
The very interesting thing in verse 15 is the last phrase. After he tells them they're going to be vanished, he says, "For I will restore them to the land I gave their forefathers." So that lets us know that once God has hold of us, his word is true throughout all time and all eternity. He made this promise to Abraham, and no matter what has to happen to these people to get them to serve him and worship him and him alone, he's going to do it, because he told Abraham, "I'm going to multiply you, I'm going to make you a sand of the sea, and your people are going to be a blessing to the whole world." So he's going to do whatever it is that is necessary to bring that about.
Well, and I think part of the problem, if we want to keep this honest, is that God is giving this promise, right, where he's going to, bring back his people to the land that he gave their fathers, because he's saying he is no longer going to be known as the God who delivered them from Egypt.
Right.
That's distant, right? And I get it that you people don't have a real relationship with me based upon that. There's too much distance, too many generations between now and then. But let me establish my own landmark with you. The Proverbs talks about do not remove the old landmarks, because the landmarks were supposed to tell the story of what God had done for the people. And in this sense, the the captivity is going to have to shake them up enough to say that they will cry out louder than the Hebrews who were in Egypt did, making bricks without straw. This will have to establish a new relationship, a new covenant, something that would stand out as a thing that would wed, right? Wed together both God and his people. And so this is what God is talking about, that, oh, but don't worry, this is going to happen. I will bring you out. I promise to bring you out, because I sent you there for you to learn the lesson. And what connects that is, verse 20 and 21. Verse 20 asks, well, okay, after all that, will you make gods? Will a man make gods for himself, which are not gods? Will you continue with this, false, this worship of false gods, idol worship, and dealing with that? And verse 21 is simple, where it says, therefore, behold, I will this once cause them to know. I will cause them to know my hand and my might, and they shall know that my name is the Lord.
It's the Lord. Absolutely.
And so that's the same goal that God had for the children of Israel as they embarked on establishing a relationship coming out of Egypt. So it's not against or beyond God and his work or his intent. Notice this. He says he will cause them to know 3 times.
Mhm.
He will cause them to know twice, but they shall know a third and final time. He will cause them to know in general once, and then again he will cause them to know his hand and his might, dealing with his strength and how he wields and yields his power. But then finally, and they shall know that my name,
Name is the Lord.
his entirety of who he is
Hmm.
and how he is. And so um, putting that in perspective, right? Putting that in perspective, um, God's intent for his people is to bring about a time where they recognize, right? They recognize that God is offering, you know, God is offering some um, serious, you know, redemption, but it's gonna force them to go through something to get that and get there.
Hmm.
And so before we uh, finalize this and wrap this up, Pastor, you got any summarizing thoughts about this chapter as we wrap up?
Well, the main thing that comes to my mind is that we have to look at these lessons and say, what is this saying to me and my generation? And I believe that the Bible tells us that these things were written for our learning, upon whom the ends of the earth have come. So we need to read these things and say, okay, am I falling out of line with what God is demanding of me as a Christian?
Mm-hmm.
Because when the children of Israel uh, fell out of line with what God was demanding of them, there were consequences. And in many ways today, we are starting to live the same as them, that there will be no consequences for our sin,
Mm-hmm.
because America is, the nation that's spreading the gospel to the world. But God is letting us know that not going to tolerate any foolishness from us any more than from Israel. So we really need to uh, focus in on what the Lord is requiring of us today.
Well, yeah, I take that along with the fact that here is another chapter, another incident in the book where um, God has been um, he's been put in a position, right, um, to make himself known
Hmm.
and to take a stance. And I think that uh, for lack of anything else or any comparison to anything else, I think that God's treatment, uh, I'll use that term, God's treatment of the matter
Hmm.
is, uh, is just, and I think beyond, and that's what I get out of reading this chapter by chapter. Um, his treatment of the matter is also calculated.
Yes, calculated.
If we can see this, we can see God. He's unleashing fire, and then he's pulling back and not fanning the flames as high as he talks about restoration. Restoration is still part of the conversation.
Right.
Um, maintaining Israel as his established and first love is still part of the conversation. That he's still, orchestrating things to, not to wipe out their land, not to swallow up their tents, not to leave no remnant of their existence, but to actually pull them out of captivity and reinstate them on the same places between the same borders that he had once given them already is that's how God works. And as I said, you can see how calculated it is.
Right.
And so I'm looking forward to seeing in chapters to come how does God continue both that on and off the gas messaging, but still continue to develop this relationship with Jeremiah.
Mm-hmm.
Because Jeremiah is coming to know God differently and see God differently. And where are we in the development of Brother Jeremiah? Chris.
Yeah, chapter 17 is definitely going to be interesting.
Yeah, and so listen, y'all. This is just abbreviated. Look at the study. We're looking at a few key points, some key passages of scripture. Remember the cup of consolation that God speaks of, and Jeremiah dealing with those mourning about him and mourning around him. And think about this when we talk about what are the consequences, what are the issues, what are the things that were at stake when God, right, when God was pouring out to his people. And continue to read it, continue to read it, continue to read it, read the study, and read the blog, and check it out. And like I said, read the book of the Bible itself, and get the word in you, and let the other sources just help you enrich that word. It's one chapter, once a week, throughout the year. We'll continue it, and if you can discipline yourself for that study, one chapter once a week, those 52 weeks will fly by. We're in week 16
Right.
already, and we are chugging along. All right? Listen, y'all have a blessed one. Be good. God be with you.
God bless.